Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'm here back with more tremendous amounts of value for you. And in this video today, we're going to not only be expressing our Second Amendment right, we're also going to be talking about the most powerful emotion for persuasion. Yes. And just a quick spoiler alert, it's shame. I'm spoiling it because I want you guys to really think about this the entire time rather than keep you on an open loop the entire time. I'm going to close the loop right now. The spoiler alert is that it is shame. Okay? Shame is the most powerful emotion for persuasion. And what I'm going to do in this video today is I'm going to prove this to you in 3 different ways. I'm going to prove it to you theologically, neurologically, and psychologically. Okay? So let's let Danielle take a break now. Stay right there, Danielle. All right. So let's start with the theological explanation as to why shame is the most powerful emotion for persuasion. And in order to do that, we must go back to Genesis. So let's take a voyeur down to Genesis, the first book of the Bible, the Old Testament. Okay? If you remember correctly, here's basically what happened in the first story of Genesis. So God created the Garden of Eden, okay? And he made man, Adam, and woman, Eve, in his image, okay? And he essentially said, hey guys, you're in the dopest place on earth, right? Just don't eat the apples, okay? Whatever you do whatever you want, just don't eat the apples. And they were like, okay, right? They said, yeah, that makes sense, God. And then you know what happened? Eve was like, hey, you want to eat the apple? And Adam just said yes. Okay, so it's like, of course, that's what they did. And then, shortly after that, they realized, we're naked. They didn't want to be naked. And so, what happened after that? They put together some little tree leaves and put it over their genitals. I guess I didn't really realize that Eve has more than just her vajayjay showing, right? There we go. And so, on top of that, we also had it where they were just like ashamed of the fact that they were naked. And so they wove these little like tree things together, these little leaves together, and they made these little covers for themselves. And like, nobody's going to notice, right? And then Eve obviously said, so true, King. So then what happens? Well, God finds Adam hiding behind a bush. He comes down and he calls out Adam's name and realizes Adam's hiding in a bush. And he said, me, damn it, you ate the apple. And he said, yeah. So, guys, think about what just happened here. Don't do this thing. We did the thing. And then we were ashamed of the fact that we were naked. We were vulnerable. And God realized this when he came down and that Adam was hiding from God. Okay? So, our original sin is linked to shame. You cannot deny this. Our original sin is linked to shame. This is why it holds the most weight. Shame is a very, very powerful emotion. And for those of you who are avid book enjoyers, if you're a book enjoyer, a great book on this is a book called, let's get the black, Power versus Force. And what Power versus Force talks about is there's this emotional frequency scale, okay? And at the top is love. The Masons don't want you to know that it's actually care, but let's just put that out there, right? So it's love according to this book, okay? So love. And I should probably explain that. It's actually care, and the reason why it's care is because you can love your child, but if you don't take care of your child, is it really love? Like imagine your baby's over there just crying. You're like, oh, I love my child. But you're not taking care of it. Are you really expressing the highest frequency? No, care. At the bottom of this emotional frequency is shame. Go and read the book and you'll see this. But shame is the lowest frequency of emotion. This is why. It's the original sin. It's linked to the original sin. The original sin was, just not listening. But same thing. It was us going towards knowledge. And so if you can understand this, you're like, okay, that makes sense, right? It's theologically proven. But you may then be asking, well, Nick, I don't believe in the Bible. Which if that's the case, you should. You best believe we're in a biblical prophecy right now. But, for all my avid dummies that don't believe in that stuff, if that's the case, guess what? I'm just kidding, guys. I'm kind of not, but This also applies to our early ancestors who were hunters and gatherers. And you may ask yourself, how, Nick? How is that the case? Well, let me provide an example for you. Let's say that there's a tribe, okay? And the tribe has men with their wives, okay? Let's say this is like the year 700, okay? Men with their wives, they live in a little village, right? They hunter, gather stuff. Men hunt, women gather, take care of their kids and everything like that, and they protect each other. The men protect the perimeter, and they keep everyone safe, okay? So imagine that's a scenario. And then one night, what ends up happening is the men are going out on a patrol, and they catch one of the guys who was not on the patrol, who decided to miss it, in the forest, having sex with another man's wife in the tribe. The head leader, him and his wife are having sex. And they're all like, what are you doing? And they notice it. And then they're all like, right? Oh no, they found us. What would happen? Well, those people would get kicked out of the tribe. They'd say, get out, go, leave. You're no longer welcome here. You've betrayed my trust, and you've compromised our integrity in this village. You're no longer welcome here. And now you're no longer inside of the one thing that keeps you safe, your tribe. It was very scary to be a lone wolf back in the day. Because think about it. You have a bear attacking you. What would you be more comfortable with? A bear attacking you and there's one of you, or a bear attacking you and there's 18 of you? 18 of you are going to kill the bear. You're not going to kill the bear. So the world is a very dangerous place, especially in those times. I mean, there's no lights. Like, there's just fire. And then on top of that, at any given time, you could just be raided by a tribe of barbarians. So, guys, like it's not a safe place to exist in. And so you wanted to stay in the tribe. You cannot remove thousands of years of programming. You can't. You can't. The main reason why you are walking down, you notice something that's different, right? You're like, hey, that person's wasn't here before, or hey, that wasn't there previously, or hey, like that's not supposed to be there, is because you were wired to be able to see things that are not a part of your natural environment, to be able to detect whether or not it's a threat. And so people want to say, oh, you can just get rid of that. That doesn't apply nowadays. You can get rid of that. Yeah, okay. You're going to get rid of thousands of years of neurological programming. Okay, yeah, no. I think that's very similar to what Jordan Peterson talks about with the lobsters, right? What does it mean to be a lobster? Well, you have your lower level lobster, and the lower level lobster, right? He's all defeated and he's walking around all sad, right? They're millions of years old, lobsters. Maybe hundreds of thousands, I don't really know. But they're millions of years old, let's just say it's that. And so, essentially the lower level lobster, he's lost to the big lobster, and so he's defeated. But if you give a lower level lobster, one that's defeated, who lost in a battle to the higher level lobster, if you give him the equivalent of antidepressants, what you'll see is his posture comes up and he'll fight again. I mean, that's a big idea. It's like something we should actually look at, huh? It's like, yes. You just don't remove that. Like, you can't get rid of that. There's no way that you get rid of that. And so, guys, neurologically, because we have a desire to stay as a part of the tribe, to be included in the tribe, we need to realize that that doesn't go away. You don't want to experience shame, because shame would lead to what? You got shamed out of the village, or you got shamed and lowered your position in the village. Your status lowered in the village, in the tribe. So neurologically as well, it's a big thing. It's a very big thing. So now the next part would be psychologically. So, and just note that I forgot about what that was right here. This is why we are neurologically wired to not want to experience shame in our day-to-day. Okay, right? That's exactly what I said. So you can also see this playing out in real time in our society. So psychologically, how does this develop? Okay. So one example, influencers. You can look at a specific somebody whose name shall not be mentioned, who... let's just do this, and this should explain everything that you need to know. A certain somebody that is an influencer has a tendency to call you many names. Brokey, wagey, poor, etc., right? Shame. You should be ashamed of yourself. Why do you think that he is so powerful at marketing? Why has he accumulated such a massive crowd? Why does he have such a massive audience? Shame. It's one of his most powerful techniques that he uses. Another one whose name shall not be mentioned, but he says things like, I spent 10 years in prison. 10 years in the penitentiary, right? Look at you, I'm fat as shit. Right? You see all these big buff influencers yelling at people and telling them, you should be ashamed of yourself. See that? Dan Pena is a perfect example, as I'll say his name. But Dan Pena, like he does this, you should have rolled down the inside of your mama's leg. People have a tendency to listen to that, and it's very powerful because we don't like it. We don't like the feeling of shame. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I think this is an important time for us to talk about ethics. And ethics are very important because ethics are what allow us to not be a piece of shit in the way that we use our messaging. And you may say, well, Nick, sometimes people need to hear these things. And I say, true. Is there a more graceful way to do that? Yes, there is. Always there is. And I'm going to show you how to do that today. But influencers do this in real time nowadays. You see this everywhere, all over the place. They don't use a negative, or most use a negative form of energy to persuade you. However, I'm going to show you how to not have to use the negative energy and can instead warp it a bit so you can actually empower people instead of disempowering them. Disempowering people, in my opinion, is never the right way. You could argue, well, they're disempowering them so they can then be empowered. Yeah, okay, cope. Massive cope. Another example. I won't say it out loud because YouTube and whatnot. But remember that? Remember this? Remember when this happened? If you didn't get it, you should be ashamed of yourself. You should stay at home. Naughty, naughty, bad boy. Shame, 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 shame. Remember that? Probably one of the most successful marketing campaigns of all time for the important to keep in mind that notice how every single time it's a major worldwide thing, wars, everything like that, shame that you don't take a side. Shame that you don't support them. Shame, 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 shame. Because it's a powerful motivator. Another example. Remember this thing? If you can't read it, it's an M as in Mary, an A as in alpha, a G as in giraffe, an A as in alpha. Political division. See this there as well. Oh, you should be ashamed of yourself. Don't you know that he says this and he's a meanie poo-poo head? Shame, 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 shame. Notice how in almost all of these very major occurrences of life, there's some form of shame that's being used on you to be able to get you to sway in one direction. And when you can detect it and see the perpetrator and what they're doing, you can break free from that and understand right away, hey, I'm trying to be influenced right now. They're trying to influence me. I refuse to feel this shame. I stand by my decisions. I don't need to get into a morals and dogma conversation here at all. But guys, the proof is in the pudding. This is one of the most powerful emotions that you can weave into your marketing. Shame. If they use it here, if they use it here, if these people are using it and blowing up online, it should indicate to you that shame is the most powerful emotion. It is. And you can either use it for good or you can use it for bad. Now you may be asking, Nick, I don't want to be on the dark side. I'm a Jedi. I don't want to go to the Sith. How can I use the Force for good? How do I use this information for good? Great question. Great question. I'm glad you asked that. And for that, you get one cookie. I'll draw it for you right now. Here's your cookie. That's yours. You can have it. Okay? Take it on the house. Okay, but you want another one? I'm going to charge you $7.99 plus shipping and handling. It's not a free plus shipping offer. Okay? So, guys, people don't want to feel shame. That is why we should use it in our marketing. People don't want to feel shame. So, if that's the case, right, we know it's one of the most powerful emotions. Shouldn't we serve our products as a way to get away from the shame that they're currently experiencing? Doesn't that make sense? Of course it does. Everything I say makes sense. So, we can do this in a classy way, or we can be a serious prick. And if you want to be a serious prick, by all means, go ahead. I personally don't recommend that. I think that that's a wrong route, and there's consequences for that in life. And the reason why I've brought Danielle back into the frame is because, I don't really know, I just kind of seemed fitting for the moment. But I just wouldn't recommend being a serious prick. Doesn't make sense. Why? Like you can bring people towards a positive energy or you could bring them towards a negative energy. Both are equally as powerful. And like Danielle here, Danielle can be used for good. Now here, look, I'm going to spin this. This is going to be great. Danielle can be used for good or Danielle can be used for bad. And I don't want to use Danielle for bad. Why? That hurts people. I don't want to hurt people. So I choose to use Danielle for good. And it's defending myself. And it's also, I'm not going to say that stuff on YouTube stream. Not a good idea. All righty, Danielle, why don't you take a seat? There we go. Okay, so here's some classy ways to do this. We can tell a story about someone else experiencing shame. Right? Like, you don't have to put it on the prospect reading it. You should be ashamed of yourself for being overweight, you fat fuck. Like, no, that's not very effective marketing strategy. But if you were to tell a story about how a woman, she's like, I realized one afternoon when my daughter came home from school crying that my weight problems had transferred over to her. Here's what happened. She was on the bus and all of a sudden the kids started throwing snacks at her and calling her fat. And she came home crying, saying, Mommy, they're making fun of me because of my weight. And at that moment, I realized that all of my decisions, my inability to just cook basic meals that are healthy, my constant desire to rush towards sugary foods and fast food and everything had a ripple effect and caused my daughter to experience the same problems that I was ignoring for life. And that's when I realized it was time to make a change. It was time for me to change so I could be a better role model for my daughter. So that's one example versus the other example where it's like, if you're fat, you're an awful example for your children. Who's going to hear that and be like, you know what, I'm going to buy this person's product? Like a very hurt person will buy that. But most people will just immediately, not for me. No, thank you. No, thank you, sir. Right? So we can tell a story about someone else. Now it could be someone else. It could be you, your story of it, which is oftentimes the most powerful one. But it could be also just someone else. Sally didn't know, She didn't realize that her habits were going to catch up to her in such a way. It started with a bad breakup, but slowly over time, Right? Tell a story. That's a classy way to use shame. Because the person's feeling that. They're like, yeah, me too. So we can accumulate stories that represent that shame. I had one where I was writing for a weight loss offer. And one of the things that the guru had was a story where she would like eat almond butter. She really liked almond butter. And she was so ashamed of her like cravings that she would eat the almond butter by herself in her car before going into her apartment with her roommates. Eat a whole jar of almond butter herself. And it's like, that's a lot of shame. Binge eating, right? And she talked about her binge eating problems. Instead of saying, you should be ashamed of yourself if you eat like that. But her saying, no, I was binge eating. And at a certain point, it finally caught up with me. I felt such insane amounts of shame as I had each different bite moving into my mouth. All right? Perfect example of how to do it. Another way is by asking questions which elicit the feeling of shame. I'm going to take a sip of water while I let you guys ponder this for a second. Asking questions which elicit the feeling of shame. So, a question that elicits the feeling of shame. Do you wake up in the morning and wonder blank? Does it ever feel like blank? Are you someone who's trying to blank? Have you ever felt like blank? So on and so forth. There are questions you can ask which elicit the feeling of shame. I'm not going to go into detail right now because this video is almost at 20 minutes and I want to keep it below 25. And so what I would tell you to do, a very good exercise, would be going to ChatGPT and typing in, hey, here's my offer. You can load in your creative brief, or if you don't know how to do that, just join the free group that I have in the description of this video, and you can basically just learn how to do all that type of stuff. But you can ask ChatGPT, hey, for this market, what would be some good questions which would elicit the feeling of shame to someone? Right? Great question to ask. Russian superstition, that if you sneeze, there's something you just said that was true. So that is a good point to wrap up on. What I just said is true. Everything I just said is true. And so you should use this in your marketing in a classy manner, not in an unethical manner. And here's what I'm going to end on, guys. If you have a good product, you have a moral obligation to never pull a punch. Say the thing that needs to be said. Never pull a punch. Now, how can you pull a punch? Or not pulling a punch, but how can you in a classy way, punch, right? Think about boxing. Okay, I could be an absolute dick and punch someone in the cock, punch them in the back of the head. That's a dick move, right? Or I could be a gentleman and face, body, that's it. And if I see a very vulnerable spot right there and I'm simply just sparring with the person, why would I do that? Why would I want to hurt that person right there? So that you could be a dick, you could be classy. Always be classy. So that's everything I got for you guys. My name is Nicholas Verge, and I hope you found this useful. Peace.